Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behavior nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behavior geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behavior nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. Once part of the ATA tribe, you'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. But we will get started on today's episode, which is actually going to be part 2 of my conversations with Dr. Afiya Fredericks, talking about the growth mindset. If you missed part 1, then we will link to it in the show notes, but just in case you are going to listen to this one before part 1, I'll introduce our guest again and then we'll dive in. Dr. Fredericks is the Director of Professional Learning, Implementation and Research at Mindsetworks. She was introduced to the growth mindset at the onset of her graduate school career, where she studied the growth mindset throughout her master's and doctoral studies. Afiya delivers talks and workshops for educators, leaders, and businesses. She is also an adjunct professor teaching research methods in statistics and psychology foundations to college students. There she has been able to apply her work on mindsets and create a classroom environment and culture that embodies those beliefs. Dr. Fredericks truly believes that a growth mindset is more than just a concept that we want our students and colleagues to embody, but a lifestyle that we should all strive to commit to. A St. Croix USVI native, Afiya enjoys travelling home and taking in the magnificent views. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome back to the show today, Dr. Afiya Fredericks. So much gratitude to you for making time to come and hang out with us again.
No problem. Thank you, Ryan, for having me. There's nothing more that I love than to be able to just have these conversations about mindsets and the importance of it and the value. I'm super passionate about it. So this is like, I don't know, this is like being able to go out and walk on the beach for me.
Fantastic. And we are fans of getting people to the point of passion talking or doing what they might do if they're walking along the beach. Now, as mentioned in part 1, I'm super excited about creating this content on the growth mindset. Finding out about it and reading Carol Dweck's book, The Growth Mindset, literally changed how I viewed myself and helped me better understand others. And I've been wanting to create content on this for a long time. As mentioned in part 1, though, I'm really excited about being able to record this episode in June 2020. As one topic that is really occupying my thoughts at the moment is how to provide you, the podcast audience, with more tools, resources, and strategies to be effective ripple makers as we work to disseminate information about what we do and to become effective at working with everyone, including ourselves, and working with others who might have a different approach to behavior modification and training than you do. I believe to build our skill set at doing this, there is value in seeking these conversations about what kind of mindset would best set you up for success. And there is no question in my mind that the growth mindset has immeasurable value for our animal training community. So let's dive in and continue to learn all about it. Now, Afiya, we left off last time with you sharing about being labelled as smart as a young woman. And then, in your words, you just cruised through the rest of your academic journey until you went to Howard University and found that first article on the growth mindset. And you decided, yep, this is what I want to spend my life learning about and sharing with others. So what happened next? You did a master's and a PhD on this topic?
Yeah. So I did my master's. I think it was specifically on growth mindsets and teacher expectations and kind of the intersection and the value of that on student learning and achievement. And then from there, I continued the line of work on mindsets for my doctoral studies. And I focused on growth mindset and self-efficacy and its impact on students, and again their achievements and their beliefs and motivation as well. And so for me, once I kind of found and understood the power of growth mindset, after that I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to share this message with everyone, with the world, because I really believed in the work that much. And I knew that for me, that was the key to really allowing me to go beyond kind of that wall, that self-imposed wall that I hit. Right. And I know, like with work on mindset, sometimes there's this misconception that it's really just for low achievers or struggling students or struggling individuals who, for whatever reason, haven't been able to actualize their potentials. But I would also argue that for those students who have been labeled high achieving, we can also get trapped into that fixed ideal that we're just, naturally, right? Naturally this. And so the challenge with that becomes when we're inevitably challenged, when we inevitably face setbacks, mistakes, like how do we deal with that? Right? If we have not previously equated intelligence, our abilities with struggle and hard work and challenge, and may not have encountered much of that, then that's the question. Then what happens then when you encounter those inevitable moments of struggle? And so for me, I plateaued. As I was explaining last week, I really plateaued. I remember I just kind of gave up and I said, you know what? I was valedictorian for 6th grade, for 8th grade. I'll let somebody else have at it. And, for me not necessarily working as hard as I could, that essentially equated to maybe more B work, if anything. And I know for different people that could be different. But when I think back, I think of the potential that I had and just not utilizing it and not maximizing that potential. And so for me, that was disappointed. Right? Whereas someone else would look and say, well, I mean, you did fine. Like it wasn't a problem. But one thing I learned with growth mindset is that it's not about you being in competition with other people. It's about you being in competition with yourself. How do I become a better version of myself? How do I become better than I was before yesterday? Right? That consistent improvement and growth over time. And when I really got a hold of that in grad school, when I read that first article by Lisa Blackwell, Carol Dweck, and Kali, I'm just going to say T just because I don't want to mispronounce her last name. When I read that first article, everything just became so much more clearer to me. And not to say after that, it was like, I got it. I know it now. And my life is forever changed. And that's it. There was so much there. It's a process. It's a lifelong journey. So I'm constantly having to reaffirm, my beliefs, constantly having to be aware of my triggers, right? When I get into those spaces that might trigger my fixed mindset, I'm becoming better at being aware of those moments and being able to essentially engage in positive self-talk or reframing. Because, for me, it's like, the truth and the reality of your abilities and your intelligence and what you can do. And so I constantly have to remind myself at times. And so the interesting part is the one area that I significantly struggled with was math, right? Math and statistics, research methods and statistics. I struggled in those areas. And so I remember the first, I think it was, I had statistics and research methods in the same semester. And I remember I took the first stats test. I got the results back. I failed. And then, I was just like, oh, it's okay. You got to keep pushing. It's all right. And I remember I took the first research methods test and I failed that. And I think I just broke down. And I remember it was sometime after that experience, like shortly after that, I read that first article. That was a game changer for me. I remember going to my professors and saying, this is what I did. How can I do things differently? What do I need to do? And just reaching out to seek support, to seek help. Like there was something comforting in knowing that there were things that I could do to improve, right? The question is, was I tapping into all of the resources that were available to me? Was I reaching out to experts or those who, had mastered concepts that I hadn't yet? Was I looking for information available in the libraries, on the web? And so with the knowledge that I could grow and improve, the question for me then became, and I say this all the time because my colleague Jen Machen always says this. She asks me, what are you going to do about it? And so the growth mindset really put me in that place to be receptive and open to not just see failure as an maybe unpleasant experience, but to take it further and say, well, where are the opportunities here? How can I learn and grow from this? So the interesting part was, okay, so I'm in grad school, I'm working on my doctoral studies, and I need a program to teach students growth mindset. And I say, well, why reinvent the wheel when I'm sure there are, people who've done this? And so I reached out to Carol Dweck. No, I never thought, because at that time, to me, she was like the superstar. And I'm like, oh, Carol's never, Dr. Dweck. That's who, all PhDs were at that time for me. Like, Dr. Dweck would never have time. For me, she responded to me and she connected me with Lisa Blackwell of Mindsetworks. Now I'm a graduate student now. And so I was able to utilize one license of the program to support my research. So I remember I graduate May 10th, because nobody forgets the date, trust me. PhDs are something else, I tell you. So I graduate, and maybe a week after I graduate, I remember thinking, I didn't do this alone. There were so many people that were there to support this journey that I had. I need to start making a list so I can start thanking everyone that I can think of that had a part in my success, right? It takes a village, right? And just pulling and drawing from that. And so Mindsetworks came to mind, and I reached out to Lisa and I said, thank you so much. I completed my degree and these were the results. And unbeknownst to me, there was an opportunity in the company, right? Some people might call that serendipity or whatever you want to call it. It was beautiful. So through gratitude, an opportunity presented itself. And that's how I first got introduced and then came on board with Mindsetworks. And so at that point I said, I love the research, I love the theory, but then it became, how does this look in the real world? Like, how do we actually apply these concepts? How does this look in classrooms? How do I support educators and employees, et cetera, in the work, right? So for me, that was the transition of being immersed in the research and theory lens to wanting to get into the real world and say, well, how do I support individuals in a real way? How does this translate into the classrooms, into the quote unquote real world? And so those first couple of years really gave me that kind of crash course and allowed me to support others through this theory and research. But the one thing that really stood out to me, again, gratitude. So I'm heading back to Howard University because I want to thank, the professors that had any part in my, achieving the PhD. And I remember the program director at the time for the psychology department. I remember coming into her office and she was like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm like, what in the world? She said, we need someone to teach research methods and statistics too. And I said, oh my gosh, no. I said, you know what? So I already have this degree, right? So nobody's going to hold anything over me. So I just sat down and basically broke down why I was not the person for the job. I said, listen, I struggled. I said, you remember that first test I got in your class? I said, you remember I failed it? You remember how much I struggled in the class? I would come for your office hours. So I basically wanted to present my argument as to why this was not a good idea. And she let me talk, and at the end, Dr. Cole says, and that's why you're the person for the job. Right? And so when you think about, she said, it's because I struggled. It's because I was willing to work through that struggle and seek out the resources and the information that I needed. I wasn't afraid to acknowledge what I didn't know and when I needed support. She said, that's why you're the person for the job. And so for me, that was a live example, not only of the power of growth mindset for self, but when you hold that belief for others, to provide that opportunity to others because you see them as growing, changing, learning individuals, then you're more likely to open up opportunities for those individuals or other individuals as well as a result of the growth mindset that you hold for other people. And so that was my first semester teaching at Howard. And the beauty of it is through the experience of being an adjunct professor, I've been able to then literally apply growth mindset into my classroom. And then I share my struggle with my students. I let them know how much I struggled, and I use that to support them and to build their growth mindset up to understand the value of the challenge, the struggles, the failures, and how that's integral to their growth, their learning, and their development. So I'm sorry, that was a very long response to your one question.
No, I think through gratitude and opportunity presented itself. You said some people call what your experience was serendipity, or they might call it that, I think you said. And I can think of situations in my life where one might label it as serendipity that have landed me in contexts and roles and employment that seemed very unlikely to happen. And I never thought about it as potentially being through gratitude before. So then I'm curious, was it? And also, was your landing there because of gratitude, or is gratitude a component of the growth mindset? And so one might additionally say the growth mindset landed you in these places of employment?
I would say that's a stretch there. However, here's the interesting part of that. So Oprah has this saying, and maybe she got it from someone else. I'm not sure, but I've heard it directly from just Oprah's words. And I don't know Oprah personally. Would love to meet her, by the way. However, she has this saying that says she doesn't believe in luck. That what it is, in fact, is when preparation meets opportunity. And so if I look at that equation, the preparation, as part of that, it's what we have control over. And as a gateway to that, it's growth mindset. Growth mindset opens us up in a way that allows us to recognize our potential for growth, understand that our, possibilities are limitless, and allows us to take action in ways to support those beliefs. Now, the opportunities, in my mind, that's more aligned with serendipity, right? But be mindful that opportunities aren't always pleasant ones either, because for me, I look at math and research methods and statistics. Those are opportunities for me, opportunities to grow, opportunities to develop. And that professor offering me that opportunity, initially I saw that as, oh, no, I can't do that, right? But in fact, it was actually an opportunity for me to learn, to grow, to build, to further build my skills and reaffirm my belief in my abilities to grow and develop. Right? So when you say when I say serendipity, and when you're referring to that and the fact that it is present in all of our lives, I think that's one thing that I've noticed, because I love talking to people and asking questions. Everyone has a moment where they happen to meet someone that led to something, or happen to be in the right place at the right time, right? Those are those moments, I think, of serendipity that are integral in our journeys. And I would align those with the opportunities that occur that we can't predict, that we didn't create on our own per se, or completely constructed. Those are those opportunities that I think the growth mindset allows us to prepare for and be ready for, to accept when those opportunities come along. So I think that's, me and my research lens, That's kind of how I see that equation working. And so I think growth mindset for me was critical in me being able to recognize those opportunities for what they were and to say, yes, I'll take that challenge on. Yes, that's an opportunity for me to grow, for me to learn. Yes, right? Because had I not been in that place or space, I would not be able to say, yeah, I'll do it. I would have just said, you know what, thanks. I appreciate you thinking about me, but I cannot do that. Maybe I wouldn't have said it in those words, but I would have, found a way to get out of it. And I think that's where the consciousness and awareness comes in, because as adults, we have executive function over our lives. And you hear some, people say things like, well, the way my schedule is set up, or, I'm busy. And so I think it takes a level of consciousness to say, well, why did we pass up on that potential opportunity? Was it really a matter of these external, challenges? Or was there something deeper inside of us that questioned our ability to actually accomplish that thing? But it takes a level of awareness and consciousness to get at the core of why did we not accept the call, whatever that call may be? Why did we not take advantage of those opportunities? But I'll also say growth mindset does not mean that we have to grow in every area at the same time. Like, that's not necessarily what growth mindset is saying. We definitely have to be mindful of what's important to us. So like the CEO of our company, Ed Brasino, he always says that. He says, I have values and I have priorities in my life, and I will, take on challenges in those areas in which I deem most important. I can't do it all. I can't do everything, right? All at once. I can't grow in every possible area. So you may hold a growth mindset and choose not to grow in certain areas for whatever the reason is, but that's a choice that we all have to make. The question is, can we grow, and do we believe in our abilities to grow and develop and to work through challenges and failures in these areas? And the answer is yes, we can, because neuroscience supports that we can grow. The question is, what are we going to do about it? As my colleague Jen Machin always asks me.
When preparation meets opportunity, and hey, you reached out to Carol Dweck. Maybe you can reach out to Oprah. We'll have you back on. So then I'm as you're talking, I'm wondering, like, do people with the growth mindset feel uncomfortable all the time? Now let me frame how I got to that question in my mind. Mm-hmm. I've just been through a professional certification within our industry, which took 6 months. And with all of, as your CEO says, you can't be growing in all of the areas all of the time. So, I remember before, and you say where preparation meets opportunity. I remember before doing the certification, colleagues of mine said, Ryan, how are you going to manage the time for this? And I said, I'll figure it out. I'll just jump in the deep end of that swimming pool and I'll splash around until I learn to stay afloat. And so I was not prepared. And I was running a business. I was doing in-person consulting as part of that business, and I was running the online space, and I had friends, and I had family, and I had a house, and I had this, and I had that, and I had others, and I felt I'm going to use the word stressed. It was not pleasant, that feeling. However, I reflected on the fact that I frequently feel that. Like, I'm frequently placing myself in positions where I don't feel good. Like, I don't enjoy this feeling. Yet why do I keep putting myself in situations where I feel like that? And I reflected that this is where most of my growth happens. It's placing myself in those positions. And then I talked to a colleague and she's like, yeah, but you can grow without feeling like that. And I was like, and then I was like questioning myself, like, do I want to put myself in these positions? So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like, is that, like, for me personally, it doesn't feel good to be that uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I do appreciate the growth that happens in that space.
Yeah. So I think it's important that in all of that, we also think about self-care and the importance of taking care of ourselves, and balance is important, and whatever that essentially means for you or looks like to you, right? So I definitely find myself very often in uncomfortable positions or saying yes to things that I'm not quite sure I can do, but some others have said, you know what, I think you would be great for this. And I'm like, well, I don't know, but I'm curious. I want to try. So I personally, my personal experience of being in the growth mindset or trying to really implement those practices regularly, if not daily, I find that I am taking on a lot of things that are making me uncomfortable. Or taking on challenges that, of course, if you think about challenge, you're not quite sure if you'll be able to maybe execute in the way that you would like to, right? Like you're not sure, because if you knew how to do this thing already, it would be easy for you and you would be 100% sure that, maybe there's no such thing as 100, right? 99.9% sure that you would be able to do that thing. But oftentimes when things are easy, it's absolutely because we know how to do that, right? But I also think over time, as we put ourselves in certain positions, in certain uncomfortable places and spaces in different contexts, I think if we're growing over time, those areas become a little easier, less anxiety provoking. I think about speaking with you on this podcast. I feel like this time around just was like, okay, you've got it. You just speak and listen and share and so it doesn't mean that there's still not a level of discomfort or anxiety, or I think to some degree that's good and normal, especially if we're in places and spaces that challenge us, that support our growth, right? Because there's this saying, like oftentimes like growth happens outside of our comfort zone, right? And so I think for each person, they may experience it differently. And then also pacing ourselves. I think that's important to be mindful too, not to overwhelm, because too much of anything is a bad thing. Too much water, you'll drown, if you think about it. So, I think it's important for individuals to be mindful of what they need, that they're taking care of themselves. And, you might be able to manage 100 things on your plate because this is a scale or this is an area in which you have built over time. Maybe you've always operating in a space where you're accustomed to doing 10 things all at once, and you found strategies to support you, being able to do that and do it well. Whereas I might be struggling with 4 things or 3 things on my plate because I haven't yet built that muscle, so to speak. And so I think, again, growth mindset, I think it's really about us in competition with ourselves and us thinking about, well, based on who we are, what can we handle, at a time? Is this enough? Is this too much? And I think to some extent only we can answer those questions. But I will say I do share a similar experience that I am more likely to take on opportunities that might be a little difficult for me, a little challenging, because sometimes I'm curious. Sometimes I really want to see, like, can I really do that? Like, wait a minute, this would be great if I could do it. I don't know. I don't know if I can, but that might be pretty awesome, right? I'm sure I can grow and develop in that area. I don't know where I am now and if I will measure up to the place that I would love to be at, but I do know through opportunities like that, I can grow and I can develop. And I think there are a lot of challenging emotions that come with pushing ourselves, like shame, like fear. And those emotions can really get in the way of us taking advantage of opportunities. And so I think self-compassion is really important, really important. Empathy, and not just for ourselves, right? And sometimes I ask, if I were talking to a friend of mine or my child, and they were experiencing this challenge or going through this situation, how would I speak to them? Because sometimes I think we're our worst critics and we aren't compassionate enough with ourselves. We don't extend that empathy to ourselves. And I think those are all really important in supporting us maximizing that belief that we may hold, that growth mindset, and supporting us then taking that next step into the mindset, the behaviors that support the belief, right? To then eventually seeing the outcomes. So I think if you're a little bit a little bit uncomfortable rather, in taking on some challenge or some opportunity, that might actually be a good sign that you are putting yourself in a position to stretch, to grow, to develop. And again, too much of anything is probably not a good thing. And so I think we have to be aware of where we are. Are we taking care of ourselves as we take on these challenges, as we stretch ourselves? And so we definitely have to make sure we be mindful in all of it. So yeah, I think that was a great question, actually.
I've made heaps of notes. I kind of feel like they relate to a specific question that we're going to cover today. And I realize if we're ever to cover it and not end up in episode 3, I'm going to try to bleed into the notes I've made and the areas that I want you to expand on into the question that we decided to talk about today. But before we do, you work for Mindsetworks now.
Yes.
So I'm going to frame this question in a way as well to try to lead you towards the answer that I think will be most helpful for the audience. What does an average non-pandemic world-looking day look like for you? Obviously, right now, your work day might be slightly different. But for Mindsetworks right now and in your role, what are you doing? What does your average kind of workload look like?
Yeah. So it's a combination of many things. So predominantly I'm focusing on professional learning. And so the question is, what do customers currently need? How do we best support them through work within the realm of growth mindset? And how do we provide that to them in a virtual space? And so I know 2 weeks ago, I conducted a virtual webinar. It was 3 hours for a corporate organization, a company. And so this time, wait, did you ask pre-pandemic or are you saying now during the pandemic? I'm sorry. Let me just clarify that.
I was thinking pre-pandemic, but hey, share what you're doing now because that sounds interesting as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So now it's been a matter of figuring out how to provide the support through mindsets for the current time in this virtual space. How do we engage customers, engage organizations in how they can support one another during this time, during the pandemic, through growth mindset and then beyond, right? But pre-pandemic, there was a good bit of traveling, right? So we work a lot with education organizations. My team and I, we would travel to schools, travel to different corporations to support them through professional learning. Whether it be workshops, keynotes, webinars, coaching, but then also through the programs that we provide. And those programs predominantly are for children, right? And so I know for one, we have Growing Early Mindsets, and that's for pre-K through 3rd grade. It's a framework and curriculum for early elementary and early education, early childhood education. And I actually am able to utilize that with my son, which is amazing with the products that we create because I get to use them at home, which helps to further deepen my understanding and I think understanding of how it's applied with children and with kids. And so my son is 2 and he definitely has a stuffed neuron. And I think it was yesterday that I said, stop biting on the dendrites. And so now I've introduced a new term. So just finding creative ways and understanding how we can teach our babies essentially neuroplasticity in age appropriate ways and gradually being able to see how this develops and how it will grow. So supporting schools, organizations through preparing them in the programs like Growing Early Mindsets. We also have Brainology, which is a featured program for later elementary, middle school students, again, teaching them about neuroplasticity, essentially how to maximize how to utilize realize the maximum potential of their minds, right? Through the knowledge of the neuroplasticity, through understanding how emotions can interfere with our ability to maximize our brains and how to regulate those emotions to support our learning and our growth, memory and the strategies. And so really supporting educators as they support their students through those programs. And then we also have Mindset Maker, which is a program for educators to support their understanding in growth mindsets, foundations, how it looks and how it can be applied into the classroom. So pre-pandemic, it was providing that support to schools and organizations. Much of it was in person and physical. And so now, of course, since the pandemic, it's been how do we find creative ways now to support the changing needs of educators, of schools and organizations, considering what's happening in the world now. And so really being able to apply the concept growth mindset to the current time, if you will.
And I've seen you have a section for parents. So I am a parent and I'm an educator of a 12-week-old in one day, young earthling named Summer. And I know that she is now operating on her environment and learning what is reinforcing and what is aversive. So as a potential customer of Mindsetworks, what is my journey? Where do I go online to find stuff? And what would you recommend that I do for Summer's development moving forward?
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so as a parent of a young learner, if you will, I think for one, so just visit our website, mindsetworks.com, head into the science page just to understand more deeply about, neuroplasticity, in addition to language, right? Like that's the one thing that I thought about when you mentioned for your daughter, just the language and the importance of the praise and the feedback that we give, and how do we highlight the process, highlight the strategies that they use and the effort. And that's something that I've been working on becoming really conscious with my son, because I realized it's easy for me to do things the way that were done, the way in which it was done for me. And that's that automatic response. So it takes a level of consciousness and awareness. And so informing yourself and learning more about mindsets, learning more about the language that we utilize and how to use that to support our children. And so now, instead of telling my son something like, yeah, good job, great, which isn't negative, it's more neutral than anything, because it's just a kind of blanket reward. Like, oh, you get some praise, Instead of just telling him things like that, I would now focus on what did he do that created this outcome. Did he keep trying? Was he being persistent? Did he continuously attempt this task? Did he fall and get back up? What is it that led to him achieving this level of success that I now want to reward him for? And so being very mindful about highlighting that. And also, what I want to do is I want him to get excited about things that are difficult for him. I want him to equate challenge with opportunity to learn and to grow. I want him to see mistakes as an opportunity. And so now I'm being a lot more conscious of how I see those events as opportunities for him. So when he's frustrated, I'll go over and I say, Cairo, breathe. Let's go. Let's take some. Sometimes I'll sit him down and I'm holding his hand and I'm trying to, teach him that self-regulation, because I want him to see, hey, challenges are hard. They're difficult. It's unpleasant and uncomfortable, but I have some strategies for you. And I try like breathing exercises with him. And then we go back and we try again. And so when he's able to get something over time and effort, I am trying to be conscious about highlighting that for him. So he connects the experience of struggle and working with success success and reward and learning and growth. And so that is something that I received through my learning more about growth mindset. That's also something that we share and engage our participants with through professional development and professional learning. So that's one. There's growing early mindsets, which can take you, it comes with anchor books, and it can take you from pre-K through third grade. And so, of course, I have my set ready, and I actually read those books with him. I think the first book in that set is Hey You, It's Me, Your Brain. And so he's already learning now. How much he's able to process, I'm not sure as yet. However, we're reading those books. He is going to, when he hears the words, neurons and dendrites and growth and learning and development, this is not going to be foreign to him. And so I'm starting from now, from I think from the beginning when I was reading to him, I was introducing him to these concepts. And, we don't really know when exactly the learning happens. What we do know is when we see the evidence of it, when it's in a measurable form, that's when we can say, oh, he's learned it. But all of that time that he wasn't repeating, he wasn't, talking, learning was happening then. So I say start as early as you can, inform yourself, visit the site, get that additional information that you need, and then the programs. And so Brainology also, we have a parent component for Brainology. If you want to work with your child at home as well, that's something that's available. And I think it's beautiful because as you're learning, having that your children learn alongside you and having you both learn and grow together, I think that's a beautiful thing. And of course, ideally, if you are implementing this at home, ideally, you would want to go to your workplace and have that also be implemented in that workspace as well. Think about, on the job, how many individuals are afraid to take on a challenge or, fearful of failure because maybe there's not a lot of psychological safety in that environment where growth is valued and learning is seen as important. And so we also definitely work with companies, organizations to support them in their learning, to support their leadership in understanding growth mindset and how to apply it in the workspace. So there are a lot of opportunities available. And I'd love to see you all, on our site and be able to support you all for sure. So those are just some of the ways that come to mind when you ask about, well, what can I do? It's never too early. Can't wait for summer.
What do you define as pre-K? It's like 2-year-old?
Yeah, I think pre-K is about 2 to 3 essentially, because I think kindergarten is about 4 or 5. Yeah, Kyra's definitely been getting it from infancy, toddler, and so in that realm, I think that age range is thinking about, or that kind of grade level range is thinking about organizations like education organizations that might want to adopt the curriculum or framework to support the children or students. And the GEM Growing Early Mindset framework, it is intended to essentially be like an inoculation because it comes from the assumption that children have growth mindset within them. Think about how many, their survival is dependent on them, not just falling that one time and saying, you know what, walking isn't for me. I'm done with it. Tried it one time, didn't work out, right? Think about how much children, exercise their growth mindset, falling down, literally getting back up, continuously trying to reach for things. I mean, when you think about it, that's neuroplasticity in action. That's growth mindset in action. So the Growing Early Mindset curriculum was really created by my colleague, Dr. Kendra Coates, as a inoculation and not an intervention, because she realized that our babies have this in them. And so the idea is, how do we continue to foster and nurture that within them as they go through the formal education? And how do we provide those environments in our homes as well? And so, yeah, I definitely recommend it, as I'm definitely using it with mine for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure you and the ATA audience will hear about my ongoing journey with this as as all of Summer's learning over the next lifetime. Hey, and people can go to mindsetworks.com.
Yes, mindsetworks.com. One word.
Hey, thanks for sharing all of that so far, Afiya. We love hearing about what we label as people's behavioral odysseys here on the show, so we appreciate you sharing that with us. I've already spent a bit of time on the Mindsetworks website, and I like that you have the mission of the company that we read out in the last episode for visitors to see. If it's okay with you, I'll read that out again before we go into the 5 things that you're going to share with us.
Sure.
Mindsetworks is the global leader in growth mindset development, leveraging the pioneering research of Carol Dweck and Lisa Blackwell. The company's mission is to enable a world in which all people realize continual learning and growth. The diverse Mindsetworks team includes practitioners, coaches, leaders, and researchers who collaborate to translate academic research into products and services that nurture positive learning, beliefs, habits, and cultures. And we discussed you sharing with the ATA podcast audience, Afiya, the 5 biggest things that you feel your company teaches and that all humans can use to operate more effectively. I feel like I've been pulling some out as you've been talking. You've been talking about attitude. Attitude of gratitude, I was going to say. You've been talking about reaching out to experts that have mastered concepts already. You're talking about positive self-talk and reframing. But in your words, obviously, what are the 5 biggest things that you think your company teaches, the growth mindset, Mindsetworks teaches, all humans, that we can use to operate more effectively?
All right. Okay. So not necessarily any particular order, right? But the first thing that comes to mind for me is neuroplasticity, right? The fact that our brains are ever growing, shaping, developing, that there's potential for us to continuously rewire our neural pathways, to strengthen pre-existing pathways, to generate new neurons, which is essentially like neurogenesis, but just the power of our brains, right? To grow and to change form and shape regardless of our age. And that's a thing. Now, the rate of change, of course, is going to differ based on how young or how seasoned we are in our life, right? However, the availability of our brains, our neural pathways to develop, to grow, to strengthen and work for us, it's always there. It's available to us, right? I think that's essentially the power of the growth mindset. It is based and seeped in science. And I think that's one of the core concepts that we definitely teach and share. I think another point related to that is the fact that effective effort and strategies, they support the building of our neural connections. But also, I think the second thing would be mistakes, failures, and challenges. These are all inevitable, but they're all opportunities for us to learn, for us to grow, and use them in the service of learning. They're potential for us, right? And I think that's really important, really beginning to shift the way that we view those events in our lives. So moving away from those events being defining moments, right? Or things that define our lack or signify our lack. Oh, I failed. I'm not enough, right? Of whatever. Shifting those events to actual opportunities, right? It's a matter of what do you do with the challenge, with the failure, with the mistake? What do you do? And that makes it really critical. And that is also, in fact, seeped in science, right? In neuroscience, which is pretty amazing. So I think those were like maybe 2.5 things. I'm not sure. Everything just blends into one. But I think thirdly, we teach the value of our language, the words that we use, and how the communication that we choose can put others in a growth or fixed mindset, can kind of trigger others to operate in one or the other. Just as I was saying previously, with our children, but also with our colleagues, with our friends, with our spouse, right? Like, what do we focus on, and how do we reward behavior or praise? What kind of praise do we give, and how are we stating through that what we value? Right? Is it just the product? Is it hard work? Is it the strategies, the effective efforts? Because you're going to identify those as important through our words if they're in fact important to us. And if they are, then you can actually trigger someone into that growth mindset to say, ooh, that individual values my hard work, values me seeking opportunities, values me reaching out, asking questions, identifying what I don't know, seeking experts and others who are more knowledgeable than me. I need to do more of that, right? And so the power of our words really is something that we definitely teach and share. I think 4 would be emotions. The power of emotions. And it really gets into the social and emotional learning phase of things, which we call SEL. But the power of our emotions to the fact where it can interfere with our cognitive functioning and abilities, right? If we think about like fight or flight, some people refer to that as a flipped amygdala. When we are in that state and that amygdala is taking control, we're essentially shutting down parts of that prefrontal cortex, which helps us to think, reason, logic, to make sound decisions. That's being shut down. So if we're triggered, if we're activated, if we're experiencing extreme fear, anxiety, nervousness, whatever, if we are activated and our amygdalas are in full control, unfortunately, we're not making the best decisions during that time because our prefrontal cortex isn't able to kind of take control of that moment. And so what we definitely share is the importance of utilizing strategies to help us effectively regulate. One that we definitely teach is square breathing. For someone else, it might be mindfulness. For another person, it might be meditation, right? So I think it's really important not just to know that our brain can work for us, but how do we support it, nurture it, right? Whether it's through the emotional regulation or nutrition, sleep, and those factors that also play a part in our abilities to maximize the functioning of our brains to work for us and our bodies, right? So I think that would be number 4. And then 5th, I would say making time, more deliberate time to spend in the learning zone. Right? That place in which the goal is to focus on what we may not do well or what we may need to develop more and focus that time on learning and growing and attaining additional resources and support. Or it could just simply be every day I might read. I think some of our top achievers, they talk about reading or learning and spending time in that space to devour information and to attain knowledge and to grow. I think we definitely need to be more deliberate about that and in supporting our growth. And when you really think about it, if you think of athletes, for every game that you see, right? And the game would be analogous for the performance zone. How many hours and days are they spending in that learning zone where they're practicing or they're building their physical bodies, or they're spending way more time in the learning zone than those moments that you see them on the court, on the field, or wherever they may be in that performance space. So I think one of the really critical pieces that Mindsetworks definitely shares is to really spend time deliberately growing and developing and learning and being deliberate about that. because I think sometimes, we can be in a space where we're just going and going and performing and performing. And the reality is when we're in that space, we're going to plateau, and then eventually decline. Actually, I think there's research that demonstrates that if you're thinking about, like, let's say medical or doctors or physicians, if you look at them throughout their careers, there's this like steady rise in terms of their practice as they, in their early years. And eventually, as they're seeing more patients and spending less time, learning about new technologies and new advancements, etc., those practices actually decline. If they're not spending that time and you look over the span of their, professional life, it tends to plateau and then decline. And I think that speaks to how we kind of get busy and then it just becomes go, 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 perform, 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 perform. That is actually not an effective way to continuously improve, learn, and grow. And so definitely spending that deliberate time in our learning zone, I think is really important. And then I think I used this example the last week where if you think about things that we do, I think maybe before the pandemic, maybe driving would be something that we maybe did regularly, if not every day for some of us. And when you ask yourself, well, how much better am I at driving, today than I was last week, than I was last month? We're not necessarily improving from day to day, week to week, month to month, or typing, right? We type every day, but are we really improving? And so when you think about it, if you're thinking about performance versus learning zone, when you're spending that time at work, typing a paper or, messaging a coworker or a family member, that's like performance zone. Like you're typing to get it done. You're typing for accuracy. It needs to be correct, right? That's performance zone. And we do that every day for the most part. But how much better are we getting at increasing our speed and our accuracy and our typing and not having to look? And you're probably not improving. Why? Because you're not deliberately trying to improve on specific areas or sub skills within the realm of typing. And so it's not just literally the number of hours that you're spending engaged in something. It's the number of hours you're spending deliberately practicing skills or a subset of skills, etc. So I think a big take home or lesson that we teach is making time deliberately to spend in the learning zone and making sure we're in that zone more often than we are in the performance zone, if possible.
So, thinking about this typing analogy, because there's been 5 days, something like that, between this recording and the last one, and there was an opportunity, or there was a example in our online community where someone asked a question, and then your specific example about typing came to mind, and I didn't have time to write it all out then because I was in the performance zone and I was just getting things done. But I just said, hey, it will be revealed when you listen to this week's podcast as to what I think the answer to your question is. So let me throw an example at you and let's see if it's relevant. So with training animals, every animal in front of us, every learner, whether it be a human animal or a tiger or a dog or a cat or a snake or whatever animal we're working with, every learner is unique. They've got a unique learning history, they've got unique genetics, and so what we've done 100 times before with the same species and the same behavior might not be relevant and might not work with the individual learner in front of us now. So there was a discussion about developing yourself and all of the different tools available that science teaches us that we can use to modify and intervene with behavior. And the skill comes in becoming proficient at all of those tools and knowing when it applies to the individual learner in front of you. And someone said, yeah, that's great, but how do we get there? And I was thinking of the typing analogy. And so there's a saying from, I think it's from Crucial Conversations, that says perfect practice makes perfect, rather than practice makes perfect. Your face, no one can see it, suggests that that's not true. But what that meant to me, let me tell you my interpretation of that, which might be different than yours and might be completely different than what the author's intended to say, is that we can't just be consistently applying ourselves. We've got to look at those tools and strategically learn about all of those individual tools to become better at doing those tools, so that we can reach that place where we have all of the tools and we know when they're applicable to the individual learner in front of us. Is I don't even know what my question is anymore. Does your typing analogy kind of fit in that space for that person to say, how do we get there? How do we get to the space where we are proficient at all the tools and we know when to use them for the individual learner in front of us?
Yeah. I think it definitely applies. My face went kind of
I loved it. It was great. I took a screenshot. I didn't. I'm joking.
When you said perfect practice, I was like, well, like when you say perfection, I mean, that's also a challenge there too, because that trying to attain this, unattainable thing that can be problematic in itself. But I think for one, being in that learning zone, I think there is sometimes a time that we have kind of reached that, I guess, that wall of what we can identify as maybe the best strategy to continue the journey. Or you might need an expert eye to say, hey, if you work on this, right, this might help you, right? Because we have limitations just depending on our level of expertise, that someone who might be more experienced, more, have attained a higher level of mastery might be able to look at what you're doing, understand it, see it, and say, have you tried this? Or you might want to focus on that. So I'll say that being in the learning zone might mean having to reach out to others who might have that experience, who might be able to identify those areas that might be able to help you along that journey. Or, if we plateau and we're like, I don't know how to improve or what to do at this point, it might mean having an expert, in that area, in a particular area. And when I say expert, someone that has a lot more experience, knowledge through their, time in an area as you may have. And so I think that's the one thing that came to mind when you presented the analogy, because I guess typing is a very basic one in the fact that if I'm struggling with typing, I'm sure there's a program that I can purchase that can, right? It might be the solutions to improving in an area like that might be more obvious, might be more like, oh yeah, Mavis Beacon, was it like years ago or something? I think that was like a typing program. I don't, I'm not endorsed by them. I am not aware. It just came to mind. But I think in that example, I think it might be more intuitive or a little more, you might be able to identify what you can do with a little more ease. I think it gets challenging as you increase the complexity of a skill or an area. And the first thing for me is, well, if I don't know that skill as well, or if I've reached a wall, there has to be another individual. There has to be additional resources possibly to support individuals who are on, maybe a level beyond mine. And again, that's where that stretching oneself and kind of going outside one's zone of comfort, right? Whether it's to reach out to another person or it's to say, can you look at what I'm doing? Can I break down my process to you so you can maybe identify, because you have way more experience than I do, or you've experienced more success over time than I have. And so I think sometimes having a community like you're providing with your platform, having a community for people to come together within a domain, right, within a realm where you can draw on the experiences of others. I might be experienced in one area or domain, whereas another person might complement me and, be more experienced in something slightly different. And so I think it's important for us to recognize where we might reach that wall, if you will, and where it might be time to continue to stretch and grow and reach out to those who might have, higher levels of experience and success than we do. Hopefully that answers the question. But
well, I feel like there have been numerous times throughout Animal Training Academy and in the production of this podcast where I've said something and then I've gone, man, I wish the audience could see the expression on this person's face. Which brings us to point number 2 there. That now I can identify that if I see that facial expression, I can get excited because there is an opportunity to grow. Or maybe number 4, the power of my emotions will kick in and I'll become fearful and I won't be open to growing. But through this podcast show, number 5, I'm making more deliberate time to spend in that learning zone, become vulnerable and try to show courage and ask what those facial expressions mean. And also now I appreciate number 3, the value of our language. Am I going to use that word perfection moving forward? We will. So, but what I do know is I have number 1, neuroplasticity. And I can form.
God. That was beautiful how you just worked all of that. And you know it's so interesting. In my class and my coworkers, sometimes we're on video chat and they're like, Afiya, fix your face. Fix your face, because I definitely wear my emotions on my face. And so I definitely have to be mindful of that at times. But that's an area of growth for myself. Thanks for pointing that out, Ryan.
It's funny. There's been some sayings that I've had that I've kind of like repeated numerously and been reinforced for it, obviously, because I'm repeating that behavior. And then I've said it to someone who I would regard as a better tennis player than myself. We're talking about animal training. A better person, more knowledgeable, more experienced. They have ended up with more success via their procedures than I have. And they've gone, Ryan, really? What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, God. So that would fall into that bucket. But as an opportunity to grow. Number 1, neuroplasticity. Number 2, mistakes, failure, and challenges are inevitable, but are opportunities to grow. Number 3, to contemplate the value of our language. Number 4, to contemplate the power of our emotions. And number 5, making more deliberate time to spend in the learning zone. Sadly, after going through those 5, we are now at the final question for this 2-part episode. Afiya, we've shared your journey from a young child through your academic career and talked about what you do in 2020 and everything in between. We haven't travelled thus far much into the future, so I'm curious to do that at this point. Can you share with us what you would like to see happen in the world's, this is a big question, in the world's mindset? But or another way of framing this might be, what is the growth mindset impact going to be over the next 5 to 10 years? What would you ideally like it to be?
Oh, that is indeed a big question. Oh, man, the possibilities. You just asked me to dream really big just now. That's a beautiful thing. I think for one, it is going to be really utilizing the power of neuroplasticity to allow us to look at us all as, I want to say, equal, right? Truly equal as human beings, with unlimited potential, with unlimited possibilities, to really be able to utilize the knowledge, the science, the belief, and apply it and implement it for us to see each other, all as contributors, potential contributors to society. To be able to look and recognize that we all, regardless of background, ethnicity, religion, race, etc., we all have something to offer the world, and it's all valuable regardless of how differently it may look, how differently we may look, how different we may operate, our belief systems. I think my hope is for us as a world. I think this is equivalent to people saying, world peace, I want world peace. But no, truly, especially during the times that we are currently in right now, as the world and America really come face to face with our realities of, inequality, and specifically the Black community. And so I feel like you can't deny the value of mindsets especially in this time and era. But I do believe that we have a long way to go in the value that we place on human life, the differential, of value or the lack thereof of certain people in this world, unfortunately. And my hope is that as more of us come to the awareness of, the belief systems that we may hold, we're able to build on those maladaptive systems and to grow, to open up and have conversations, to talk to one another, to learn from one another, and to really see one another as human beings, and to see us all as individuals that have unlimited potential to contribute to this world, to make a difference, and to ultimately be able to support a world, the type of world that we would want our children and those that come after them to live in. Right? I think it's a very large order, if you will. But I do believe in the power of growth mindset and the potential that it has in that aspect. But I think then taking a step back, my hope is if this starts at home, right? If there's this awareness, this acute awareness and value of growth mindset in the homes, if parents are aware and beginning to be conscious of what was done to them, right? The awareness that their parents did the best that they could with what they had, and that we're now being provided with more knowledge to do better, that we apply that knowledge as we raise the next generation, the next generations, right? And so my hope is that this will be accessible to all, especially parents who are going to be raising the next generation. Because can you imagine a world, a generation with children who are literally the future, right? Every leader, every person in power at this time was once a child. They are literally our futures, and so imagine if every child knew their unlimited potential, understood that they would have to go through challenges and they will experience, failures, setbacks, but that those were all opportunities for them to learn and for them to grow. And it's only a matter of time before they figured out what strategies worked to help support them in their journeys. Like, to imagine a world like that, I think would be beautiful, where our children would be able to support each other with their growth, right? To create environments and cultures that foster that growth mindset within one another, to run businesses and corporations and companies where they value growth, where they see it mandatory for each other to be engaged in that learning zone, to continuously challenge themselves. I just see a world of innovation, no holds bars, not being afraid to step out of the comfort zone, not being afraid to make mistakes and to learn. I just see so much potential and opportunity in a world like that, where if our children are beginning to get that knowledge, to attain that belief and strengthen their belief that they're born with, then for them to create a world, right, where everyone believes in their unlimited potential and is willing to rise to that and not deterred by challenges and setbacks, but inspired by them after, of course, going through the unpleasant feelings and maybe some tears. That's definitely normal. Yeah. I think that would kind of be the two main hopes for me in terms of where I see the world. I think you said 5 to 10 years. It's probably going to take a couple more decades than that. However, you just asked me to dream, and I dreamt a little just now. So
I was like, wow, yeah, that's a lot for 5 to 10 years now.
They say reach for the stars, or no. Yeah, reach for the stars, because if you don't reach them, you'll be amongst I don't know. There's a saying. Is it the moon? So you can be amongst the stars? Maybe that's what it is. But Yeah.
Well, I really
Yeah.
like that thought that everyone's doing the best they can with what they have. Everyone's done the best that they could with what they had. We all have something to offer the world, and what would we achieve if we all believe in every individual's unlimited potential? Once again, Afiya, thank you so much for sharing everything with us over these 2 episodes. Just before we do officially wrap up, though, I know we've mentioned it already, but could you just remind everyone listening where they can go to find out more?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find us at our website at mindsetworks.com. That's mindsetworks.com. We are on Facebook. That's at Mindsetworks. That's one word. Twitter and LinkedIn using the same handles at Mindsetworks, and on Instagram at mindset_works. And so I can't wait to engage with many of you and for you to for some start and then continue your growth mindset journey. Again, it's about supporting lifelong learners, and this work never ends. It is a continuous journey. There's always more to learn and grow in life. We are forever students, even after college and certificate programs and having grandkids and all of that. The learning never stops, and science supports that. Our brains definitely have the capacity to continually grow and learn throughout the lifespan. The rate of change that this growth is going to happen might slow down a little, but it's always possible, and our potential is unlimited. So thank you for listening and spending time with me today, and Ryan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We will link to all of that, all of those different places on the show notes for this episode. This has been so much fun, Afiya. From myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we have a lot of gratitude. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to hang out with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. There's something there for absolutely everyone, and we're looking forward to having you join the tribe. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.